All right. Got it. All right. So for those of you who do not know Kelvin, Kelvin is founder of Turning Within Meditation, and I recommend this to everyone who comes to our group. I cannot tell you how beneficial this is, especially for our parents who are sick, who have a lot of disease, who are depressed. I always send them your way. He is also the author of Overcoming the Fear of Death. Marcus Aurelius updated. Where's my book? I had it here. Do you have your book that you can show them?
Yeah, so this one, Coming to Your Death.
There's one, and there's the other one.
Karen's holding up my other book.
There you go. Perfect. This short essays in Marcus Aurelius are amazing and wonderful. That book you definitely need to get, and the other one also. Today, we're going to talk about spiritual red flags, because we've had a lot of those come up with some mediums and some things that people have been told, and Kelvin will help dispel these myths and, you know, some non-truths maybe, and he'll talk about that. And by the way, you all can ask questions after he talks. Okay, so take it away, Kelvin.
Okay, yes, I'll leave a lot of time for Q&A. I want to introduce some ideas, some of these concepts that you'll hear people talk a lot about that relate to death and dying, the afterlife. What about losing loved ones, especially children like all of you tragically have? My heart goes out to all of you. I've helped a lot of parents, as Anne Marie knows, who've lost children. And it's just, you know, you never get over it. So let's hit that one head on. You never get over it. What people say that, they don't know what they're talking about. It's always sad. You're always grieving the loss of a loved one. It's just part of normal human behavior. Can you get to a place when you're not as overwhelmed by the loss? Yes, that's possible, but it takes time, and depending on your makeup and how soon it's been and all these factors that you can't really compute. Nobody knows how long it's going to take before you're not overwhelmed by the experience anymore. But you know, I've had losses of loved ones, not children, but I've had losses of loved ones, and it takes a while. So first, we're going to get into some of these afterlife things, but I'm just going to talk about grief and grieving for 60 seconds first. Don't let people tell you that there's some way that you should be grieving, or that there's a better way, or that your way is the wrong way, or you should be thinking about this differently, or whatever. However you're feeling, and we do a terrible job in our Western, Eastern cultures. I have clients in 60 countries, and it's just, I hear, it doesn't matter what the religion or the culture is, people do not manage, they don't know how to talk about emotions, they don't know how to experience the emotions, and they definitely don't know how to help people who are often overwhelmed with the death and the loss of a loved one. So you just understand that nobody has the answer. There are many suggestions, and you are the experiencer, and you're the best person to decide what's working for you. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay, kind of 100,000 foot with some specifics there in terms of grief and grieving, which I help people with. I've helped people for 35 years with. So yeah, so I got these two books. This is the Overcoming the Fear of Death book. Those of you who don't know about my background, I help people regardless of religious or non-religious. I mean, you can have no religious beliefs anymore. That's okay too. Or you may just have general spiritual beliefs, or you may be atheist or agnostic. Don't believe in God, doesn't matter to me. I help people regardless. So when you see, I don't know if you can see this, is Overcoming the Fear of Death through each of the four main belief systems. So the belief systems are not religious or cultural beliefs. These are the beliefs that underlie the there's 4,000 religions I read on Wikipedia on planet Earth now. I don't know how they count 4,000, but whatever. There's a lot of them. I'm not dealing with all the specifics. I'm dealing with the 4 beliefs that really underlie all beliefs about death and dying. So you have the science belief, no afterlife. You have belief in an afterlife, but people are afraid. You have belief in an afterlife, people are not afraid. And then you have reincarnation, past lives, future lives, can come back if you want to. Okay, those are the 4 beliefs. Those are just fundamental 4 beliefs. Everybody falls somewhere in there. Maybe a hybrid and whatever, but that's what that refers to in that title. This purple book, Marcus Aurelius Updated, as Anne Marie said, is a collection of 67 essays on how to live life. There's a chapter on emotions, there's a chapter on life principles, there's a chapter on meditation, and there's a chapter on spirituality. We're going to talk about the chapter on spirituality to get together today. Some of the themes in some of the essays in that chapter we're going to talk about today. Okay, some of the themes that specifically relate to you all as parents who've tragically lost a child. Okay, so let's see. How should we start? Should we start with the spiritual red flags or let's start with a couple of the spiritual red flags. So there's an essay. If you have this book, you can read along with us. There's an ebook and a paperback version. This book, there's a paperback, obviously, an ebook and an audiobook that I narrate the audiobook for this one. This one's too long to do an audiobook for. Anyway. But on page 186, or if you have the ebook version, the essay is called 10 Spiritual Red Flags. I list 10 spiritual red flags. What do I mean by that? I mean, these are principles you'll hear from psychics, mediums, spiritual teachers, meditation teachers, whatever, that are red flags that they don't fully understand what they're talking about. And this is really, really important. Why? You've already just in the 2 or 3 minutes you've heard me talking, you can kind of get a sense from me. I think about things and I like to understand things. And those of you some of you have taken some of my classes, you know that I like to explain things to my students, because if my students understand better these different principles that we'll start touching on today, then my students can start figuring things out better for themselves. I'm into creating independent thinking minds. That means you, me, everybody, as many of the 8 billion as possible. If we can think better and think more, better meaning what? Better meaning more clearly about these principles, we can figure stuff out. And if we can figure stuff out better for ourselves, that increases the likelihood that we'll have less suffering, and less suffering is another way of saying more happiness, right? Or more contentment, feeling more at peace inside. I've kind of, you'll hear me use it in some of my lectures and see in some of the essays. I talk about happiness because that's what people, that's a concept that everybody would love to be happy. But to me, the more accurate goal in life is inner contentment or inner peace. Because example I gave recently in another talk to another group of students is I went to my uncle's funeral almost a year ago, and I wasn't happy at my uncle's funeral. He was 90-something years old. I was close with him, and his wife is my mother's one of her youngest sisters, so forth. She's still alive. Those of you who know my history, my mom died when she was 50 years old, so very young. This is the 40th anniversary of my mom's death. So this year, I still get choked up by it, just saying that short sentence to you. So, but I'm not overwhelmed by the sadness anymore. But we never lose that sadness, the loved one. But I was giving the example of going to my uncle's funeral, as I wasn't happy, but I was content. I was at peace inside. So this is, to me, the goal of feeling inner peace in life is a better way of articulating. And I think articulating and using good, accurate language is important, because if we use inaccurate language, we go, I can't be happy. Yeah, well, if I had a strict view of happiness, I can't be happy at my uncle's funeral. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's not a, I don't feel happy. It's not appropriate. So what does that mean? That I'm messed up in some fundamental way? No, the sadness is not being messed up. That's a normal, natural grieving response to loss of a loved one. But can we be at peace inside at the same time without either of them canceling each other out? Yes, that's what I help my students understand and experience. So it's not just an intellectual thing. It has to be spontaneously experienced. That's what experience means, right? So anyway, spiritual red flags. You know, here's one. When you hear people talk about the first law of thermodynamics, I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly with you. I don't want to, you can come back in the Q&A and ask me about any of the specific ones. I'm just going to go through them fairly quickly. If we want to talk about any specific ones of these spiritual red flags, write a note and then come back in the Q&A. We'll talk about it, okay? But the first one I list here is the first law of thermodynamics and understanding it properly. And the understanding of the first law in physics of the first law of thermodynamics is energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's a statement of the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. That means there's no beginning or end to energy. And I think, in my experience, is that our soul, spirit, consciousness, you'll hear me use the simple four letters, yeah, 4-letter word mind, M-I-N-D, to talk about our soul, but it's the same synonym as far as I'm concerned, is eternal. There's no beginning, no end. So when you hear people talk about your soul being created, that makes no logical sense. Okay, so that's a red flag. It doesn't mean you throw away everything that they're saying, but that's somebody who's not understanding some fundamental principles of what eternity means. So you cannot have a beginning of something and then that lasts for eternity. Okay, you can't have a beginning and end to something that exists out, that's uninfluenced by the field of change. That's what eternity means. All right, that's a red flag when you hear people talk about a creator or something like this, and everything is here is eternal. Here's the second one: spiritual teachers who speak about eternity and the creation of the universe. So that's another variation on the first one, but when they talk about a creator or the creation of the universe and talk about the universe having been here forever, that logically makes no sense. Okay, so you want to find spiritual teachers who make logical sense of things. When you start hearing a preacher or a spiritual teacher or a guru or anybody, or psychic medium who's channeling somebody or is, you know, connecting with an angel or some dead loved one on the other side, saying stuff like this, big question mark, okay? Because they don't know what they're talking about. Either the medium doesn't know, or the person on the other side who's giving them the information, or the spiritual teacher who's standing up in front of this group of 1,000 or 5,000 people don't know what they're talking about. And there's many of them out there who have millions of followers. Third one, spiritual teachers who tell you they're not your gurus, but they expect you to follow them and do whatever they tell them. They tell you what to do. That's a guru, okay? It's like it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it's a duck. All right, you can't say, hey, I'm not a duck, and you go quack, 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 quack. Now you got feathers. No, you're a duck. It's like, so just beware of that, because there's tons of those out there too. I mean, go on YouTube, you'll see them, and just type in spirituality and listen to a bunch of spiritual teachers. It's like, oh my God, are you serious? That's why, let me say this to all of you. I say this to all of my students. Do not blindly follow everything that Kelvin Chin says. You question what I'm saying. Does it make sense to you? Does it help you? If it does, great. And if it doesn't, don't. Okay? Use your common sense. What's that? No, somebody said something. Oh, somebody's needs to be muted, maybe. All right, I just muted you, Molly. Same thing, ditto. This is the fourth spiritual red flag. Ditto for psychics and mediums who are channeling from the other side. and then they tell you, this is what you should believe, and then this is what you should follow. Though that's a guru mentality. That's what I call a blind faith mentality. Remember that group from who was in it? Was it Clapton and those? Anyway, blind faith in the 1960s. Blind faith, that's what that means, okay? It means blindly follow without questioning. That's what a guru wants from his or her disciples, and there are male and female gurus. Blind following, do whatever I say because I know I am perfect. That's the belief system. If you follow that, you believe that, I'm not saying you got to change your belief, but I suggest that you do. It's like, it's not, nobody's got it all figured out. All right. Number 5, spiritual teachers who tell you that you're being or will be judged spiritually by anyone now or after death. Don't know what they're talking about. Okay. Nobody is judging anybody. There's no individual beings on the other side. There's no panel of judges on the other side, just like there's nobody judging you here except yourself. All right. So can you cause yourself pain? Yeah, we've all done that before. Hello, I raised my hand. You know, can you do that on the other side? Yeah, you can do that on the other side too. All right. But there's no cosmic panel of judgment or anything like this. All right. You hear that? Red flag. Number 6, spiritual teachers who tell you that you're being punished because you've done bad stuff in the past. This whole idea of karma and credits, it's like there's an accounting system, the cosmic accounting. There is no cosmic accounting system, okay? None of that. Number 7, anyone who tells you that they know your level, they know where you are in the spiritual level of consciousness hierarchy, and they tell you where you are. Red flag. Nobody knows where anybody is, and nobody knows where they are themselves if they're really being honest. They're making something up, okay? Red flag. 8, spiritual teachers who say there's an end point, that there's enlightenment, and you can reach a goal, a state of perfection. Red flag. Red flag. What does perfection mean? Perfection means no more growth. That means you cannot grow anymore. That's it. My experience is that we all are continually figuring out stuff and growing. Okay. Number 9, anyone who uses destiny, we're going to come back to this. And it's meant to be, we'll come back to that one, and we're going to talk about that in greater detail. We can talk about any of these in greater detail, but I'm going to talk about that one in a second. Number 10, anyone who uses the existence of the afterlife or other lifetimes, or reincarnation, in other words, as evidence that God exists. This number 10, another way of saying it, this, I guess I do say it here. They're two very different concepts. You can still believe in reincarnation and heaven and the afterlife and be agnostic or an atheist. So when you hear people, I've seen people banging on people on these Facebook groups saying, NDE groups and afterlife groups saying, oh, you don't believe in God, you'll never go to heaven. I'm like, yeah, really? What kind of God do you believe in? If God exists, do you think God has ego problems and cares whether you or not believe in him or her or it? That's a pretty pathetic God, if you ask me. So, but people project their weaknesses into other beings, and they think, oh, they must have. See, people, it's amazing to me, having, those of you know a little bit about my background, my memories go back 6,000 years, a couple of dozen different lifetimes. And so I have memories of being in ancient Greece a number of times, okay? It's amazing to me how similar people's thinking is now to what they think now as Disney movie fantasy ancient Greek view of Olympus, Mount Olympus and the gods. They're not thinking that much differently. People project onto capital G God now. Most people are, this monotheistic, different religions, Muslims, Christians, Jews and so forth, tend to be monotheistic versus the ancient Greece, but they're doing the same thing. They're projecting all these human frailties and weak personality traits onto capital G God, just like the Greeks did with all the multiple gods on Mount Olympus. It's like, how much evolution has happened over the last 5,000 years? Anyway, so it's just the same silliness. So I'm trying to teach people to think a little bit more clearly about these things. And if I'm not saying don't believe in God or do believe in God, I'm saying if you do believe in God, make that concept a little bit more, loving and common sense than the weakest human beings' silliness traits that people have. Oh yeah, you got to believe in me, because if you don't believe in me, you're not going to get into the heaven. They're not going to let you in. Like, really? It's like, what? Or here, so let's talk about that in the context of this essay on page 214. So I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to read these essays. You can read them yourself, but there's, I think, 4 essays in a row up through destiny and losing a child, this horrific thing that brings us all together today in this group. But this notion of it, was it meant to be? And you hear a lot of psychics and groups out there, even parent groups like this. I know it's not the belief system of this group, but not the group leaders anyway. But there are groups out there who have group leaders who believe that it was meant to be, and it's a horrible teaching, I think. But it's not only emotionally horrible and tragic and uncaring, in my opinion, but it's incorrect. It's impossible. So when you hear somebody say it was meant to be, you have to understand that what they mean when they say that is they're saying things are meant to be. Everything is meant to be all the time. It's figured out already. That's what that term means. So you have to understand the languaging, okay? Because that's the correct understanding of that languaging. If somebody's using it in a very loosey-goosey way, that's not the way it was meant to be, is meant to be used, okay? All right? So I like to teach to use English, proper understanding of proper English. Because people who start creating their own Webster's dictionary, they can do that. But then, what kind of communication are we doing? We're having like no communication, okay? So let's stick with the English words that Webster's dictionary defines them to mean. And was it meant to be is a phrase that means it was predetermined. That's what that means, okay? Meant to be means somebody or somebody's figured this out beforehand, and you had no free will in it, and your child was gonna die, and you're in regardless of what you did. Now that to me is a pretty horrible universe to live in. All right. To me, if you talk about hell, that's hell. And that's not my experience of the universe. My experience is there are might to be's. I came up with this phrase, but not meant to be's. There's not meant to be's. There's mights, M-I-G-H-T. There's maybes. So yeah, if we do certain things, can we create a potential for a longer or shorter or happier or more suffering type of life for ourselves? Yes, we can control certain things, but that's not what meant to be means. Meant to be means you can control everything. Everything is controllable, no exceptions. All right. So you see one exception to that absolute rule, that shoots the rule down. Okay. You can't have exceptions. Life is about probabilities. I talk about in that essay. Okay. So that's when you have a psychic and they tell the future. They say, well, this is it. And then amazingly, it happens. It can happen. Can that happen? Yes. But what are they seeing? They're seeing energy patterns or whatever they want to call, however they want to articulate it. And they're sensing probabilities that may happen. What does probability mean? Probability means there's a likelihood that something may happen, but it may not absolutely happen. Okay, probabilities are not absolutes. Probabilities are what I just said. Okay, so a psychic can pick up on that, and the closer it is to an event, the more likely they will be right. The farther away in time they are from the event, the more likely they're going to be wrong, or just, they'll have to say something like really vague that you interpret them as being right, like, yes, the sun will shine on 5 years from now, and they're thinking, like, well, you have a 50-50 chance, so maybe you got 50-50 chance that they're going to be right 5 years from now. Okay, but we don't know what the ozone layer is going to do, and pollution and this and that, and how a sunspot and this and that's going to affect our weather 5 years from now. So there are other things besides us who are controlling our lives. It's not just us. It's trillions of other minds on planet Earth. It's planetary, the moon, the Venus, the sunspot. It's a lot of things that affect us, that affect the crops growing and famines and all of this stuff. And it affects our economics, etc. It affects Congress. All of these people who I don't know and you don't know are making decisions. I don't know any of my congressmen, maybe you do. I don't know any of my federal or state or local legislators in Los Angeles here. I don't know anybody in California. I know are they making laws that affect me? Yes. Is that affecting my life? And does that affect how potentially it affects my children's lives? Yes. Does gun control affect the death of somebody who may have gotten killed by a gun? Hello, yes. Do you have control over all of those legislators who made this decision and that decision about that? No, you don't. I mean, you can vote and so forth. So we should, and I encourage people to vote and make choices and control what we can control, but we cannot control everything. And that's what meant to be means. And the belief just causes suffering. And I'm sorry, that's why I'm so passionate about debunking this particular myth, is because people have a tendency to cherry pick. And they say, but well, wait a minute, see this thing and this happened and this happened. And that's, what cherry picking is? That means you pick an example that supports your belief. And they do exist, those examples. But if you find one example that does not support this belief that everything was meant to be, it means the belief in if everything meant to be is false. Okay, you can't use one good example to prove an absolute across the board. Okay, that's what people tend to do. You'll see people do it over and over and over again. All right, it's another red flag. This whole idea that everything happens for a reason, this is maybe very close to home to you guys in this group, I know, but I use an example here in my essay on page 221. I say, tell Neil and Jan Armstrong that. Neil Armstrong went to the moon and astronaut and all that. Tell Neil and Jan Armstrong that when you ask them why their beautiful 2-year-old daughter, Karen, died of a malignant brain tumor. I don't even know him and I'm getting emotional just reading that, Tell Marcus and Faustina Aurelius that about 9 of their 15 children who died before the age of 10. 9 of 15 children died before the age of 10. This is ancient Rome. And they were aristocrats with lots of medical, help, doctors and so forth, medical professionals right there to help them. The mortality rate is 1 out of 3. Sorry, the mortality rate was 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 in ancient Rome died, very, very young. So this whole, I want to demystify and debunk this notion that loss of a child is due to some destiny. So the other essay here. We forget that there are so many other things at play in the universe. There's our choices. There's the choices of our dead child. There are the choices of our dead child's friends and friends of friends and friends of friends and all the other people who we don't know, who live in all the state legislators and in DC government and this and that, and all these people and the gun lobbyists and the who knows what and the drug dealers. And you could right now, I bet you, depending on how your son or daughter died, think about 100 different people right off the top of your head who may have indirectly had some influence or lack of influence, you could say. A close friend who dropped off the radar of theirs, years ago and whatever. What if they were still friends? All these what ifs. There's you could think of hundreds. They're probably more close to 100,000. I'm not suggesting that you sit down and do this, but I'm just saying, just to understand that that's the reality, and it's so out of our control. And as a parent, I have 2 living children, and they make choices that it's like, it's like, okay, and I cannot control all of that. We all have free will. Free will means personal choice. It's not a mystical, spiritual, philosophical term. It sounds like it is, and you'll hear philosophers debate free will, and your mind will turn into mush listening to most of them. But it's so simple. It just means personal choice. And they'll get into these really complex, gray, like obfuscate means to take something and do this with it. And you just twist it around until it's like this big ball of yarn. And meanwhile, it's still just it's just a piece of straight string, but they run into a ball of yarn. It's all a big mess and you can't follow it. All it means is personal choice. Do we have personal choice? Yes. And the simple way of understanding how free will impacts our lives is that so does everybody else. And that's the part that everybody forgets, is that so does everybody else in the universe have free will. And you can't control that. Nobody can. That's what free will means. That's why destiny, in the sense of absolute certainty of everything that ever will happen and ever has happened and ever will happen, is already known, is a bunch of silliness. If you've ever had a 2-year-old child or grandchild, that that's not true. They don't always listen to what you want them to do, right? 2-year-olds, hello? So we have so many examples of it. Look, I'm going to close with this one example. Most of us, if you're not Christian, you at least know the story. You may be Jewish and still know the story, or Muslim or whatever other religion. You know the story because it's a famous story of Jesus being crucified on the cross 2,000 years ago. So if everything was meant to be, that must mean that Jehovah meant to kill a soul who is described as being so close to each other as to have a father-son relationship, not a biological, but an emotional soul connection so strong as to be father and son like. So if everything was meant to be, that would mean that Jehovah would make the incredible, illogical decision to murder his own son, which makes absolutely no sense, to cause his son incredible physical suffering in that way. To me, that's an abhorrent concept. I find it incredibly upsetting, personally. And those of you who don't know the history, Paul took that and created Christianity out of that notion. Paul created that notion of Jesus dying on the cross for everybody's sins. And if your preacher or your minister or your priest hasn't taught you that, go do your own research and go to your library, It's not hard to do. And you read the religious scholars who have read Paul's letters in Greek. Paul wrote in Greek. He spoke Greek and read and wrote in Greek, and who read the original letters from Paul that lay all this out. So that's the reality. So to me, those who are Christian, especially, maybe that example loosens up your belief that everything was meant to be, because that makes no sense. So questions.
Who has a question for Kelvin?
Yeah, Marlene, yeah. You're muted. You get it?
Is death random, or do you think I'm taking it, you don't think everybody has their time, or is it just a random
It's
process?
random. Well, it's random unless you choose to make it not random. So you can choose to die yourself.
Right.
You can make that choice. And I'm not just talking about killing oneself. I'm talking about, from a suicidal standpoint, I'm talking, you could choose to let go and not eat. You may consider that suicide, but, or just, if you're ill, terminally ill and so forth, you could also have a sense that there's an illness or something that's imminent that you may, so that could create a point of dying in your example, right? But and can somebody from a soul standpoint come into a lifetime thinking that they're not going to live very long and that they're going to die at a certain point? They could, but they could also change their mind at any point too. And also, even if they think that they're going to die at a certain point, other factors may intercede and cause them to die outside of their control, earlier or later, and not when they thought that they were going to die before they came into a physical body. So the answer is not a yes or no answer. It's more complicated than that, right?
Right.
It depends on the person, and it depends on all the other influences that I just laid out.
Right.
And all the other people in the universe who may have a very, very indirect, decisions may have a very, very indirect impact on you, but may have some impact that may affect your death, So, here's an example. Like I came in last lifetime as a and I died fighting in World War II. So I died around 1942. I was born again, or I was conceived around 1950. Okay. So is it possible, Marley, that before I went into that lifetime and was born around 1920 or so, that I looked down at planet Earth? This is how hypothetical, Marley, but this is to illustrate the point, okay? That I looked down at planet Earth and I thought, World War I is going on down there. It's a mess. And look what they're doing at the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, those of you know any history, the Treaty of Versailles was a mess. Okay, they really put Germany, who lost World War I, for those of you who don't know, Germany lost, and the Brits and the Americans and the French, they did this number on Germany, And they basically put Germany into a depression economically. People were starving in Germany, and they said, you can't do this and you can't do that, and you can't have this kind of blah, 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 all these sanctions, et cetera, as a result of their surrender out of World War I. Let's say, Marlene, I'm on the other side and I'm seeing this, okay? I'm seeing this go down in 1918, okay? So if I'm born in 1920-ish, I'm conceived in 1919, okay? So let's say in 1918, I see this craziness going on with the Treaty of Versailles, and I don't have to be a crystal ball reader to see that Germany is going to be in a whole world of hurt, and they might lash out, right? And so maybe I want to go down and see if I can help turn that around, because it's going to be a mess, right? I'm not predicting World War II, but I see from the Treaty of Versailles that Germany is in a world of hurt, and there's a lot of probabilities. This is the probabilities I did talk about, okay? Likelihoods. Because you go back and read journals and magazine articles and newspaper articles back then from 1918. Lots of people were saying this around the world, that this is going to lead to another war, and it did. World War II, okay? It took till 1939, but Hitler became, what was it, 1933? He became the head of Germany in 1933. He was working on it before that, right? He wrote Mein Kampf, I think, in 1926 or something like that. While he was in prison. Anyway, so I see this, and I come down and I think, you know what? I think it's going to be a mess. And I'll probably, Marlene, I want to come back in the 50s and 60s, but I don't think I'm going to last very long. I'm predicting, kind of, you could call it predicting, Marlene, but I'm not sure, right? But probabilities are looking like there's going to be this huge war going on, within 10, 20 years, right?
Right.
And I come down, and sure enough, I come down, I'm a World War II fighter pilot. I'm in the US Army Air Corps. I'm in the South Pacific, and I have all these memories. And then I get killed. I get shot down in 1942-ish in the South Pacific, and I die. And then I hang out on the other side, for 8 years, and then I come back again. So, because a whole bunch of my other friends had come back around this time, right? And my kids and so forth came in the 1980s and 90s. So, but that's an example of probabilities I give you. So I could see this. So we can see this stuff on the other side. When you and I and we all die and we're on the other side, you can see what's going on Earth. And you can say, well, I'm staying away from that. Or you might say, yeah, I'm going to go down and I'm going to do something about it. I want to see if I can do something about that, whatever. Or you may just come back for the ice cream or the hot dogs or who knows what. Just, for all kinds of reasons, people come back. But I think that's probably, I don't know, I don't have a memory of this. I have memories of some stuff, but not of this, Marlene. I'm making up the story here to just, illustrate the example, right?
Right. Do you have feelings on the other side, like of disappointment or anger?
Yes. Every emotion. Your mind operates the same on the other side. It's just, we have less pain, less pain and suffering. First of all, you don't have any physical pain because you don't have a physical body, but you also have less emotional pain, because what does a lot of emotional pain come from on this side? It comes from having to pay rent and put a roof over their head, and they have to get food, and I gotta go work at this job, and I hate the job. People do this, and they said this to me. Oh, I wish I could just say this back to them. I don't want to get fired from my job. We have all this pressure on us. Oh, I gotta get my teeth fixed, because we don't have teeth on the other side, okay? You don't have all this stuff to deal with. And so it's emotionally much less painful also. It's much easier, to say it positively. It's much easier emotionally as well, and you can do whatever you want to do, basically. It's like vacation. Yeah. Okay.
Last question.
Yeah.
Either your son or your daughter, have they been any of your other lives?
Yes. So I talk about it in my Afterlife series, but I'll give you the short version. my daughter was my daughter at least once a couple thousand years ago, and she was my sister at least once 250 years ago, and she had independent memories of mine. So I didn't tell her about this. So when she was she just turned 28 just the other day. She turned 28, and when she was at San Francisco State University, where was that? 6-7 years ago or something like that. I was talking to her on the phone, and I was probably, talking to somebody like you, not you, but I didn't know you then, but somebody like you on the phone like 6-7 years ago, and you were asking me, oh, where's your daughter going? I said, oh, my sister goes. I said, I mean, my daughter. So I used to call her like catch myself all the time. And I finally, this would happen like a dozen or 2 dozen times or something on conversations with people I'd run into, and they asked me about my kids. And I call her I'm my daughter, and she goes to San Francisco State. And then I finally mentioned it to her, and she says, Daddy, that's so weird because I call you my brother all the time. I had this mistake, and I was like, oh my brother teaches meditation. I mean, my dad teaches meditation.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
so she'd been doing it for years and never told me.
Wow.
And then my son, I know my son, and our personalities stay the same. So my son, I know who my son was when I was a Native American in the 1800s. And there's a journal piece about him that exists today that was written in the 1890s or something about him. And it's the same personality he has today.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Reading about him, except he looks like completely different, different name and everything. But that's his personality. He can be rough sometimes. Let's just leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Lorraine, good questions.
Okay, so if we have the same personalities,
Yeah.
So like, will our children that had depressive personalities have that forever then on the other side and back?
It depends. That's a question that cannot be answered absolutely, because if their depression was related to their physical biological chemistry imbalance, then no, that goes away as soon as their body biologically died. All right. If it's related to emotional patterns that they've been carrying around for lifetimes, then they could still carry that around with them to another lifetime. So it depends. And then you can have combo platters in the same person, like it's a little of this, a little one, and a little of the other kind of a thing. And so one's going to go away and the other's going to continue. And that's just, you just don't know.
Now,
right?
Also, is there a reconciliation room?
Reconciliation, what does that mean? Reconciliation room?
I don't know. I had a medium tell me that my daughter was in a reconciliation room, but I question that because it's 2 years. Why would she still be in a reconciliation room when I get signs from her all the time?
Yeah. So you trust yourself. You don't trust the medium. Always trust yourself before anybody else, whether they're a medium or they're your next door neighbor or your dry cleaner. Doesn't matter who they are. You always trust yourself first.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, reconciliation room. That's why I asked you what that is. Sounds to me like the person means that there's a room on the other side where you kind of got to figure things out, and you got to see what you did right, see what you did wrong, and that kind of thing. And it's like, there's not a room, first of all. It's like, yeah, people may be on the other side and they may see a space that looks like a room. That's just their mind creating it, okay? Because it's just energy on the other side. So first of all, you got to understand that, right? Energy, okay? So can you create a space that looks like it's a room, like made of energy? Yeah, you could. I suppose you could do that. But there's what I want to debunk about these kind of structural things that a lot of mediums talk about is that there is no structure. It's just the structure that you're used to making up with your mind, or that person is making up with their mind, or the medium is making up with his or her mind. Okay. And then that's okay, but just treat it very loosely, very metaphorically. It's just, it's like somebody's interpretation. There's no rooms. Okay. So,
Okay.
but as far as reconciliation is concerned, reconciliation, if there's any reconciliation that occurs, it occurs between that person and themselves. That's where the reconciliation occurs. There's no God or gods or panel of judges who are saying, thou shalt think this way about what you did, or you got to think this way. No. It's all very, if you want to think about it from a counseling perspective, let's use counseling language, because that's what we kind of understand on this, in this plane here. It's very much more counseling. It's not thou shalt, you got to do this. It's not rules and regulations oriented. It's more, how do you feel now? That kind of therapy, counseling. There are counselors who work with people and help them, let's say, if you want to call this reconciliation, help them move forward with their lives on the other side, having done whatever they've done on this side, good, bad, or indifferent, And so there are counselors like that, but they're not judges like a lot of people tend to portray beings as on the other side. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. It's much more it's much
She
less
said there were
judgmental.
12 rooms you have to go through.
No. I mean,
And I thought, okay,
No.
after 2 years, I don't know.
Let's talk about this idea that you just said. 12 rooms or 14 rooms. I've heard 9 rooms. I've heard 18 levels. I've heard 7. I've heard, like 15. I've heard 27. It's like, just, you hear anybody? That's a red flag. Okay, red flag. I could have listed like 100 red flag. I just cut it off at 10. But I read a whole book on spiritual red flags. That's another one. There are levels that you got to go through on the other side. There's no levels. There are levels that people make up, and you can make up that, oh, I got to go through levels because you believe that there are levels. And so when you die, what do you think you're going to see when you're on the other side? You're going to see levels. It's like you come into Earth and you're born into a family on planet Earth, let's just say. It's no different from this. You're born into a family on planet Earth that's a cult. It's a cult. Mom and dad are in a cult, and you get birthed into that family for whatever reason. You made bad choice before you came in, or you made no choice. You thought, I'm just going to go wherever. And don't do that on the other side. Okay. Learn from this story. And you get born into a cult, and it's all about levels. And then you finally get out of the cult and you're 27 years old and you realize, wow, the universe is not all about levels. It's like that. So there's a lot of angels, not all of them, but a lot of beings on the other side who channel through psychics and mediums, and they teach levels. Because if they preach enough that there are levels, and they create enough body of human beings on Earth who then believe in levels when they die, when they go knock on your door, on your soul's door, as soon as you die, and maybe not as soon as you die, but soon after you die, the salespeople are going to come knocking on your spiritual door, and and there's going to be a bunch of them who are in the cult of levels on the other side. And those people are working through a lot of mediums. Because why? Why not start getting your sales prospects warmed up to you before they die? That's why. This is not it's not difficult to figure out. So, but there are no levels on the other side unless you want them to be. So you can join a cult like that on the other side. And that's what they are.
So we will be able to see our child.
Yeah, hopefully if they haven't joined a cult, yeah.
So we will be able to see our child when we get to the other side.
Yeah,
Because they're not in some other room.
exactly. You're gonna see them whenever you
I
want to
lost
see
you
them,
again.
unless they don't want to, unless they don't want to see you, Lorraine. So, you know, it's assuming that's the case, because I'm just saying, I'm putting all possibilities out there, because not everybody has good relationships with everybody who dies. So, you know, and I have had some clients, they don't want to see their abusive father when they die. They do not want to, and I said, you don't have to. So you can create a boundary, right? But in your case, I'm inferring from the way you're asking the question, Lorraine, do you want to see your dead child? Yes, you can. Yeah. And obviously they'll want to see you. So rooms, forget about it. Levels, forget about it. You'll hear these people say, well, you're at this level and they're at that level and you're not at the same level, so you won't be able to see that. Red flag. Throw it away.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm the anti-suffering guy. There's so much stuff that creates suffering out there that mediums are saying. It's really troubling, but you know, it is what it is. Use your common sense. And as I said to you, Lorraine, and to everybody, I said to you at the beginning of what you said tonight, Lorraine, listen to yourself. Listen to yourself. He's communicating with you. You're getting all these signs from him. That's much more reliable, is the word. Much more reliable than anything any medium can tell you. Okay.
Okay.
You're getting direct communication. You go with that. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Stop going to mediums. You don't need it. Okay. Confuse you. I mean, I'm not anti-medium either. I'm anti-bad medium is what I am. But you know. Okay. Yeah. Marlene, another question? Yeah, I'm mute.
Do our children choose us, or do we choose our parents when we're on the other side and coming back?
You again, this is the answer. Yes, you can. Not everybody does, but you can. So there's not an absolute rule there. Okay. So I suggest that we do that, and remind yourself before you die, you know, like starting now, that to make those choices on the other side before you come in another time. If you, and that, by the way, and there's no rule that you got to come back, and there's no rule that when you got to come back. You choose to come back, and if you want to come back. Okay. But if you do, start planting seeds in your mind now. Like, I got to remember, I got to make a good choice. You know? Yeah. Yeah. Many stories. Go to the University of Virginia Medical School website and type in past lives. And there's 2,700 stories there, 2,700 cases on the University of Virginia Medical School website. Just go in the search window. I can't remember the name of the department, but whatever. Yeah, and you'll pull it up. And there's a lot of stories, just like what you're talking about. There's one there's one story I took from the University of Virginia Medical School website. I don't know this. I know most of the people I tell stories about here, but I don't know this kid. This kid who was 2 years old, who died, turns out, the parents connected the dots, and he died in World War II and was born into this, I can't remember, it was a Louisiana family or something like that. And the father was a fundamentalist Christian, did not believe in past lives and everything, but eventually he had to because his son was telling him all this stuff. 2-year-old, 3-year-old. And yeah, but he's in here. The kid's in that on their website. Yeah. Other questions? Other questions?
Anybody else have a question? No?
Anything?
No question.
Marlene's got another question. Go ahead.
We love you, Marlene.
So do people choose to come back with a mental illness, or do they choose to come back and lose a child, or I have an addiction, or be
Look,
a
here's-
murderer?
Here's the thing. Is it possible for somebody to make one of those horrific choices? Yes. Anything is possible. But why would they? What kind of
I-
person would make
I
that kind of
agree.
choice? Okay. So,
Okay.
I mean, is it possible? Because in the world, free will means you can make any choice. So you're saying, did somebody make this crazy choice? Yeah, it's possible. But why would you? You know, I mean, it's not likely, but it's possible. You see, that's the correct answer, right? Because anything is possible. But what's the likelihood? You know, it's not likely that they're going to do that.
Do we come back to finish something maybe we didn't accomplish that we wanted to?
Some people might, yeah. Some people might. I've done that. Yep. I've done it a number of times. Yeah. Some people can choose to come back and finish unfinished business with people, places. Well, it could be relationship stuff. It could be bigger stuff. You know, who knows what, you know, whatever, for whatever reason. Yeah, it's possible. Sure. I've made that choice.
Yeah.
Not it, but see, don't draw from that a rule that everybody comes back to finish unfinished. See, that's what you'll hear people do. They take an example that is very common and they'll make a rule out of it that that's true for everybody. It's not. It's like people can choose whatever. That means they can choose to not do that, is what choice means. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've also heard a million times, you're going to keep coming back and doing it over and over and over until you learn your lesson. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many people say that all the time.
Yeah, that's just us. That's it. That's a thread that goes through all different religions, and it's been going on. This thread has been going on through religions for at least 6,000 years that we know about. When I say we know about, because recorded history, ancient Sumeria, you know, these ancient religions, that Zoroastrianism has these threads just like that. And Zoroastrianism is those you don't know, it's like the oldest recorded religion on planet Earth. You know, so it is way predates Christianity by about 4,000 years. So these threads of what you're saying, Anne-Marie, have been woven around for, to me, it's just another control mechanism. It's a way for people to control other people by saying, thou shalt do what I told you to do, because if you don't, you're going to have this negative consequence. It's the same old people have been doing to people for thousands and thousands of years. So my advice is to wake up, see that for what it is, and call it out as a red flag for what it is, and don't believe it. Don't get hoodwinked into following that, you know, rat hole. And it's just a rat hole. It's just silliness. It's just, yeah. So now, could somebody start talking about concepts of consequence, concepts about consequences of one's action as a helpful thing for humanity? Yes. And then it could go way off the rails. Yes. But could it have started as a concept that was to be helpful? Think about how you treat other people, because they might treat you the same way. Is that concept a good concept? Yes, it's a good concept. Then it gets like off the rails into this whole karma thing where you're like thinking that, you know, I've done so many bad things. Every little bad thing is now I have a mountain of things that's going to take me 1,000,000 lifetimes of reincarnation, Anne-Marie, before I can, you know, start at square one again.
Right.
That's where this whole consequence thing has gone way off the rails. So, I'm gonna talk about this. I'll let you guys, you can publicize this on your Voice of Our Angels group
Okay.
when I do this, but I'm talking to Brian Smith. You know Brian, you guys know Brian, right?
Sure.
So Brian's interviewing me specifically to talk about the 30th November talk, which is a talk that happened on 30th November 2014 that I helped organize, which was a talk about the history of spirituality on planet Earth over the last 10,000 years in the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Vedic traditions. Vedic includes Buddhism, okay? Buddhism is an offshoot of the older Vedic tradition, okay? So those traditions on planet Earth, which covers the majority, probably covers 95% of the world's population, fall somewhere in the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions, whether you're currently part of that or not anymore, but at some point you were, in your childhood maybe, or whatever. So Brian's going to interview me and we're going to talk about principles that were talked about in that 30th November talk 8 years ago. And Brian and I are talking about it on Wednesday, October 5th. I'll send you an announcement when he sends it to me.
Okay. Good.
And then I'm going to give people like a month or 6 weeks or whatever the math is to go watch the 30th November talk, which is a long 3-hour talk. And then on 30th November 2022, this year, I'm going to run a Q&A for everybody. So you go
very
watch,
cool.
yeah, go watch the 30th. And like I know you and Karen have seen the 30th November, maybe Marlene, you go watch that, watch it again, write down a bunch of questions. I'm going to run a Q&A on that talk on the 8th anniversary, 8th year anniversary, 8th annual anniversary, I guess is the way you call it, on 30th November this year. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah. So
Hey, Brian.
somebody kept asking me, I have questions. I have so many questions about it. I said, you know what? I'm going to run a Q&A on it. So before I ran the Q&A, I'm going to do a couple interviews with Brian and maybe Kathy Mason and some others and so forth, and then talk about that. See.
Very good.
Okay.
Everybody, does anybody have any more questions for Kelvin?
Else, Roseanne, Olga, anybody? Carmen, yeah. Roseanne raised her hand. She's raising her hand.
Uh-oh.
I have a question.
Yes.
I mean, I understand we don't have a preordained path that might be absolute. It might be more of maybe a general plan, you say, with free will that factors in. But how does something like exit points play into that, if you believe in exit points?
You can have exit points and you can have entry points too. So you can have a soul plan to come in, and your soul plan might include an exit point. The issue is not whether exit points exist or not. The issue is how absolute are exit points. They are not absolute, because the only absolute is that there's nothing that's absolute. That's as absolute as you can get. And so, but you could still have exit points, and they may exist, and that's part of your soul plan. But so many other factors, not only your own changing of your own mind, but the influence of other minds directly who are near you, and more indirectly the farther away they get from you, have an influence on your choice, in this case, exit point. So yeah, they can exist, but just as is true with everything in life, nothing is absolutely going to happen the way it's planned, for sure, because that implies no free will. That implies you do not have choice. You cannot have, here's another huge red flag. If you ever hear people say, well, yeah, you get free will, but destiny exists too. No, it doesn't. You cannot have destiny, meaning everything is planned out absolutely. That's what destiny means. Now, can we use, Anne-Marie, I'll pick on you. Can we use, the word destiny or the concept destiny loosely and say, Anne-Marie and Kelvin were destined to meet this lifetime and to talk about stuff and to help parents over, and so forth, and to talk about their connection maybe a couple thousand years ago and this and that and so forth. Can we talk about that as destiny? Yes. But can we say it was I would say the accurate way of saying it, it was kind of meant to be. It's like, we're not absolutely sure it's meant to be. That's what meant to be means. So it's not absolute destiny, but you could loosely use it that way. So you could use exit points in that same way, but you got to understand that it's not absolute. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. People talk
one more.
about it. It's an excellent.
Were you Paul?
What's that?
Were you Paul?
Was I Paul? As in like 2,000 years ago, Paul?
Yeah.
No, but I knew him.
Okay. I've seen that video a million times because it's my favorite one. But of course,
Which video?
where you explained about being with Jesus and
Oh, yeah, was Jennifer, that woman Jennifer?
yeah.
Yeah. No, Paul promised us that he would not promise. Paul never met Jesus. That's in the Bible, and that's accurate. He came on the scene 3.5 years after Jesus died. Paul never met Jesus. He was never in physical space with him. He was never in his presence, never ever anything, never heard him speak, nothing. Paul was persecuting people who didn't pay their taxes to the Romans. Okay, so he was hurting people. Let's just say, and then then Paul had to turn around, and he wanted to teach, and he said he was going to teach Jesus' teaching, and he went out and he was teaching Jesus' teaching for a little while, and then we heard through the grapevine that he wasn't, and he started doing this. Jesus died on the cross for your sins, and that's about, and he made this whole thing up. And so we had a meeting with him in Jerusalem, and we called him to the mat, and I had a real public fight with him because I liked him before that. He's a very charismatic person, etc. And but he promised us at that meeting, maybe it was about 15, 16, it's hard to say, years after Jesus died. We had the meeting with him, and he promised that he would stop doing it and he would go back to teaching what Jesus was teaching. And he lied to us, obviously, and thus Christianity was born. So I am definitely not Paul. Yeah.
I'll have to watch it again.
Yeah. Rosanna, you can raise your hand again? Oh, no.
So Kelvin, it's not a question. It's just pretty much like a statement. So like when you have a reading, it's just like when some people give you advice, you're going to take what's for your own good,
Yes.
what's going to make you or help you live with more peace, right?
Yes.
I mean, and whatever doesn't resonate with you, just let it go.
Exactly right. That's my advice. Exactly right. Thank you for summing that up. Yeah. So I'm not saying don't go to many mediums ever. No, it's like you take what resonates and you listen to what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. If it's you hear any of those spiritual red flags we talk about, you're going to go, That doesn't mean you throw everything out that they say. You just that's a red flag. You know what the idea of red flag means? Red flag means my antenna going up. I got to make my antenna go up even bigger, because if they said that, maybe they might say some other crazy stuff that really doesn't make sense either. But maybe they do say some stuff that's very helpful. Okay, so you don't throw everything out. It's just be cautious. Be your eyes open and your ears open. Right?
Put it in the back burner.
Yeah,
right?
you put it in the back burner and you just think,
Let it simmer.
yeah, that, or you throw it away if it doesn't make sense. They say
Yes.
it's completely nonsensical. You just toss it and you keep the other stuff.
Great.
Good. Anything else?
Very
Anybody
good.
go?
Anybody else before we wrap up?
Here you go.
Great
Good,
questions,
everybody.
great answers, as always.
I hope it's been helpful. So you guys know how to reach me. Just Google my name, Kelvin Chin. Just Google my name.
We'll ask Google. Google knows it all. We'll ask Google. He knows it all, just like you.
Exactly. Yeah. Ask Google. My main spiritual website, where I have my page on helping parents who have lost children. That website is kelvinchin.org, kelvinchin.org. So it's just my name.org. It's a nonprofit. It's my nonprofits. I have 4 websites. You go to the bottom of any page on any website and it links to all the other 3. You'll see hot links to the other 3. And you should subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's 120 videos there, some of which I think Lorraine was talking about one of them, that the first time I came out and talked about my lifetime 2,000 years ago. It was the first time I publicly spoke about that. It was about 5 years ago.
I've watched all of them.
Yeah, wow.
Watch them again.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a
No,
lot.
you're great. You're great. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Well, thank you so much, Kelvin. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank
Good
you.
Night.
Night.
Thanks, Anne Marie. Thanks, Kelvin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.